Last time, our protagonist completed his job with the Korean mercenary group, defeating a black mage with his insane magic talent and gun skills. His incredible performance leaving a strong impression on Dre Krungar, who gave him his card, hoping to maintain a relationship with him. The next day, Van enters the bar to find Jenny, the bartender, and Dylan at the bar. The playful Merc calls him his partner and gets close to his newly famous friend. Van asks what he's on about, and Dylan explains how excited Jenny was about his performance with the Kringar Mercs, as Jenny shuts his blabbermouth with a whack of a menu. She ignores the idiot on the ground and asks Van about the job. He explains that it was easier than Crocken and the scavenger higher-ups weren't that tough. Jenny and Dylan inform him that the District 51 scavs have a predictable skill level, but not all of them are weak, with the chief execs being much stronger, especially the higher-ups of the 20s District scavenger group. She then changes the topic and leans in to tell him he became pretty popular and many customers are asking for the Lightning Mage. She hands him a folder she made of the recent requests for him to choose from, and cringes in disgust as she hands him the blood sample of the scav. He takes both and looks at the folder loaded with requests, whilst Jenny gleams at him, keen to work together for a long time, even offering discounts on her cut. Dylan is outraged at her favoritism, but she just shushes him, and the bartender gives Van a drink on the house. Jenny telling Dylan to pay up 200,000 sell when he asks for a drink as well, to his dismay. Back at his place, our boy throws up in the toilet, purging the alcohol in his body to lessen the side effects of Viper. But with no time to rest, he picks up the folder to choose one, since Jenny needs to reject all the others. He searches through the bodyguard quests, merc jobs, and lab experiment tests to find a request from a pharmaceutical company. Lately, he has been visiting an online auction run by the city government, keeping his eye on Stania Pharma's first-class miracle drug, Stamonia. A drug that only really perks you up a bit, but with his penalty-ridden body, beggars can't be choosers. As such, he decides to take the Amnak quest that might help him solve his sleeping pill problem or get the miracle drug. A week passes and our boy has been hunting wanted criminals to test the magic skills of the support sniper. Van casts support magic on his gun and fires off a magic bullet that decimates a criminal's leg. He thinks this will be helpful until he gets to the level of magic he wants to reach, as he finishes him off. Van then enters the bar, greeted by Jenny, who tells him to hand over the Amnak request. She figured this was his choice since it's the only one that hadn't expired yet, and he seems interested in medicine. Van admits she is right and hands her the request. He takes a seat and Jenny makes the call to Amnak. Soon after, a well-dressed man on the side of the bar calls out to him and talks about his recent fame and how people call him obsessed with money. Our boy thinks it makes sense since he did hunt a lot of criminals for money. The man then tells him he's not judging him, since those with bounties are either nobodies or people so strong they don't care about the bounty. Then, Van asks, "So who are you?" The man smiles and flings a card imbued with some power toward him. It stops right in front of the wide-eyed Van, floating mid-air. Van eyes the man up, surprised to find someone with supernatural powers. The man introduces himself as Sebastian, someone that does the same work as Jenny. Van grabs the card and puts it down, asking if he is a telekinesis user. Sebastian laughs and replies, "I showed it to you just now, didn't I?" He then adds that it must be true that Van trained somewhere foreign before coming here, with Jenny then snatching the bottle he was reaching for away from him, annoyed at Sebastian for trying to steal her client. Sebastian tells her not to be mad as he did actually come here to give her something. Jenny looks over the papers inside to find that she was conscripted, annoyed that it's happening 2 months earlier than expected. Sebastian informs her it's due to a city council member pushing the agenda hard. Whilst our boy has already heard of this on the news, the city government issued a call up to all independent businesses because the Philemon delegation was expected to visit. With his task done, Sebastian gets up and shakes Van's hand, as he tells him if he ever wants different types of jobs to call him and that he gives different rewards to what Jenny does. Then leaving the bar laughing as Jenny calls him evil. She tells Van that it won't be bad to work with him if he wants individual requests, and at his surprise states no client will stay with a business owner just cause they pleaded. The two then interrupted by the arrival of the client from Amnak. In the back room, Van asks her why he's never been back here, and she replies that it's cause he always leaves straight away. She then turns back to the client and introduces herself and Van. The client introduces himself as a sales manager named Luan Sage. Sage gets right to the point and explains that they are currently developing a tranquilizer with small crowdfunding in the hopes it will sell enough to bring in profit. However, a district rep at headquarters uses gang connections to try and steal Amnak's patent rights. And when they completed it and tried to send a sample to the patent office, the info leaked, and the rep found out. Van notes that there is a spy and receives the location of where they moved the samples. Sage then bows with a cold sweat and says, "You just need to retrieve the sample and take it to the patent office." However, Van stops him there, looking him dead in the eye, and tells him he should be honest if he wants him to take the job. Van and Jenny, now more serious, state how the gang makes the job more troublesome, and they clearly want to use him to get rid of the gang in the process of delivering the samples. Jenny then gives Van a smirk and says, "It looks like we can renegotiate the reward, huh?" She then pushes forward a phone and tells Sage to call his boss, and they'll be downstairs. Back in the bar, the two talk about the deal, and Jenny expresses that the gang probably won't be that big if they work with a district manager. She thinks they'll probably be around the level of the Scavs, except for the weird mixed blood leader. Van says he'll definitely need more money then, and she says to leave it to her. Then Sage returns to the bar with a nervous nod, and Jenny gives Van an okay sign with a haughty look on her face. With the deal done, Sage drives Van to the storage place where the others are. Van finding out they hired others as well, though he doesn't know how useful they'll be. He then tries to find out some info on medicine. He brings up how they tried to scam him, which makes Sage squirm from the pressure. Van then asks if there are any other samples in the storage. Sage, happy to break the tension, informs him there is, and they probably have melatonin when Van questions further. Van satisfied since he needed some. They reach the site, but before they hop out to greet the others, Han tells Sage to stay in the car. One of the men outside comes up and bangs on the window, mad at the Amnak manager. He claims they don't have enough people. Inside, Van tells Sage they really skimped out on them, as he takes out a vial of Viper. He takes a hit and then gets out as he says, "I'll perform my worth of the pay." When the men outside see Van with the manager, they yell at him to screw off. But Van just thinks they're loud and tells them to quiet down, which only gets on the main man's nerves even more. The man then comes forward and punches at Van, but Van pivots to dodge and summons lightning in his hand. He then grabs his back and uses Bolt, which knocks him out, with the others watching on surprised that Van is a mage. Van tells them to quiet down and adds that it's a waste of time to just cry about it here, when someone in the back yells at him to get out of the way before he beats him up. Everyone but Van startled to find a red-haired man in the back who claims that Van is not better than them just cause he's a mage. The redhead then walks forward as he summons fire in his hands with a clap and states, "Not all mages are great, and if Van is here, he was probably kicked out of a magic tower for having too little mana." At this, Van gives a small laugh as he thinks of how he met two people with supernatural skills in one day, the redhead being a pyrokinetic flame user, which is known as a very strong direct ability. However, Van thinks since he's with this group, he probably isn't that strong. The flame user then bursts forward with his fist covered in flames, but his attack falters, stopped by Van and his magic barrier summoned with a single hand. Van, with eyes closed, focuses on the flames and fiery aura appears around him. The superheated flames sent onto the redhead, who screams in agony as the fire burns him. Van thinking not all pyrokinetics are fire resistant, as the redhead begs Van to save him from the flames. Van then pulls back his hand with it as he thinks he needs to improve his grip strength. The others run off in panic to get water, so the fire doesn't spread to the storage, whilst Van turns to Sage and tells him he can leave, to which Sage quickly makes his exit. Later, inside the storage room, Van looks around to find the samples as he thinks of the job, which requires him to hold on for a day and a half before he can bring the sample to the patent office. As he looks at the sample in his hands, he thinks he could just run off with them, but that's not what Amnak wants. They want him to fight the gang, so he thinks he should get rid of all of them right here, right now. He walks outside to find the others unsure of what to do. He sighs at them and asks for their number, which is 15. He tells them to split into 3 groups, patrol around, and report to him anything that seems off. After that, Van checks the wall around the storage. It is pretty tall, but it's also pretty beaten up. As such, Van uses the spell Claymore, summoning a yellow orb of mana that expands and then settles on the floor. It's a trap magic that explodes when certain conditions are met and deals heavy damage to those in its small range. So Van decides that he'll just have to change the conditions. He changes it so that it will explode when someone puts pressure on the wall instead of when people are nearby, lessening the damage but increasing the range. With the trap magic now successfully set, he secures some other places and sets more claymore spells in the walls. With that done, he heads over to the flame user, who trembles and prostrates himself in Van's presence. He apologizes with his eyes down, and when Van tells him he doesn't need to, he asks what he needs to do to stay alive. But Van was never going to kill him, though he thinks he doesn't need to tell him that. Van then touches his shoulder and declares with sharp eyes that he will give him a chance to make it up. He tells him they will soon be having guests, and he is to set fire to their shoulders just as he tried to do to him. He confirms the flame user understood and excuses him, who drips with cold sweat. Inside the storage room, Van waits as night falls. He thinks he doesn't have many vials left, so the gang could be an issue if they split into groups, so he may need to use his gun to buy time. Suddenly, he hears something outside and spreads his mana in all directions in response. With this, he can feel all the presences within 2 kilometers, 2 hot ones and 150 other ones. Van makes his way outside as he thinks they're approaching fast, and since they can't all be mana users, they must be in cars. Those at the front gate shout that they're here and to get ready, when they are suddenly blinded by the bright high beams of the gang's cars. The men look back to Van for direction, unnerved, so he steps forward and tells them to just guard the entrance, pleasantly surprised to see the flame user at the front thanks to his threat earlier. But the gang members out front aren't doing anything. Van wonders why and thinks, could it be? A loud crash then resounds from the side walls. When the others see this, they start to panic and try to get away from the walls, as the gang cars bear down on the walls from all around. Van, left with a smirk as their plan to break down the walls only confirms he will be making it back alive. One of the cars blown so far that it crashes right before him. He wonders how the claymore managed to be so powerful, but when he looks at the wreckage, he sees they were using a special fuel. The sight gives him an even broader smirk as flaming cars get sent flying from all around the storage place. When the smoke finally starts to clear up, he sees the two with high heat that he detected earlier. One, a mage with a slim build, purple hair, and a staff in one hand. This is the 3rd time he has come across a fellow mage. First the professor, then the scav mage who was a disappointment, and now the mage before him, who feels different as he leads the gang. Van's curiosity making him wonder, what kind of magic does he use? What about the type? How strong is he? How does he use that staff? Should I attack first? What about his inherent magic? However, Van manages to snap his line of thought and refocus on the situation at hand. He then sends out threads of mana to his surroundings to scout the aftermath and finds that 10 cars were destroyed and about 100 people remain. He then focuses some mana on his throat and his voice projects along his mana-enhanced sound waves that resound all the way to the gang members, as he tells them to come in instead of standing around. The gang then move in with weapons in hand, whilst Van tells someone to tell the others to close their eyes and open fire once they're inside. The confident gang members make their entrance when suddenly the other gangster who had a high heat pauses. However, Van has already finished his spell and shouts Flux Light, with brilliant blue light blinding everyone in the vicinity. If you enjoyed the vid, like, sub, and comment below. Peace.